Okay, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome and thank you for attending this third training session for CSW66. Before we go into our training session, I would just like to say a few words. Today is the 10th day into this unjustifiable act of aggression by Russia towards the people of Ukraine. Since the invasion began on the 24th of February, there has been continued escalation of violations of humanitarianism and human rights law. Hundreds of civilians have been killed or injured. According to the UN, 1 million people have fled Ukraine already, and they are seeking shelter in neighboring states. And this number continues to climb every day. This invasion is not only a violation of the UN Charter, but also an act of aggression that is a crime under international law. Soroptimist International, along with all of our 5 federations and other NGOs, call on our governments as well as the international community to protect civilians in Ukraine and their human rights as they struggle every day of the crisis. As Soroptimists, we stand in solidarity with you in standing up for women and girls in war zones. I am here for you, and I and my Soroptimist sisters will help and support you at this particularly hard and dark time. Over the last few weeks, the international community has been listening to the news media of how many countries were trying to bring about peace between Russia and Ukraine through diplomatic means. We all believe, looking back foolishly, that peace would return. Unfortunately, that is not true. Soroptimist International was founded on the principles of human right, peace, and security for all persons, similarly to that contained within the United Nations Charter. As Soroptimists, we advocate for the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals. We know that without peace, there can be no sustainable development, and likewise, without respect for human rights and international law, there will be no peace. You and I will remember that it is only about 3 months since the 11th of November that we, as we do each year, celebrate the ending of the Second World War with the words, "Lest we forget, and we will remember them." During the 20th century, Europe and the world strove to recover from the devastating impact of 2 world wars. War is never gender neutral. All women and girls are always disproportionately affected by war, and we see that it is no different in this conflict. The human impacts of this war will reach far into the future. So together with all Soroptimists, I called for an immediate halt to hostilities, for all troops to be withdrawn, and for negotiations to take over. We must allow the opening of green corridors for the evacuations of civilians from cities under attacks. Women and girls caught up in this man-made humanitarian crisis will miss out on valuable education, be at increased risk of trafficking, sexual exploitation, and violence, and will be unable to access vital medical treatment and support. And those who were on the call with me 2 nights ago will know that medical supplies are the most urgent needed. Many people will be left with long-term traumas, and the infrastructure damage to the country will be huge and will take a long time to repair. But I know that Soroptimists and many other NGOs and many other people in the neighboring countries have opened their doors. They have been the first on the ground, witnessing these challenges firsthand, finding solutions and distributing food, clothing, and supplies. I'm so grateful and thankful that Soroptimists across the world are showing compassion, generosity, and solidarity to these women, girls, men, and boys who are affected by this cruel war. We just hope that something will happen, and while guns are presently doing the talking, enough is enough, and the path of dialogue must commence. Now, I'm just going on into this training session, and here are my opening remarks. The theme for this session is to consider what is meant by the review theme: women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work, their issues and solutions. The world of work is changing fast through globalization, digital technology, increasing mobility, informality, and climate change, all of which are posing both challenges as well as opportunities in realizing women's economic potential for a better tomorrow. The world of work needs to change in order to empower women, whose work has already driven many of the global gains in recent decades. Women still predominantly occupy jobs that pay less and provide no benefits. They earn less than men, even as they shoulder the enormous and economically essential burden of unpaid care and domestic work. Women and girls have a right to be able to participate fully in society, and we know that this now more than ever requires digital connectivity and the skills to navigate the internet safely and securely. A United Nations Human Rights Council resolution adopted in 2021 recognizes the impact of the pandemic and how, as a global society, we have become more reliant on the internet as a means of participating in all areas of life, as well as access to public services, included but not limited to education and health, a source of livelihood, and an arena for the exercise of human rights. Realizing women's economic empowerment requires transformative change so that prosperity is equitably shared and no one is left behind, a commitment made in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I look forward, as I hope you are too, to learning more about these issues and how solutions may be identified in order to overcome the barriers. Thank you. I pass over to Lee.
Thank you, Maureen, for those very meaningful words from Ukraine. May the war stop now. And also for your opening remarks to this session, the third session. Now, the webinar goals and objectives is to educate Soroptimist members about the CSW66 review theme, which Maureen mentioned, is women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work, issues and solutions. And you will hear, and Maureen has touched on a lot of them, the gender pay gap and social protection, IILO Convention number 190, education for the 21st century jobs, STEM and how things have changed for women over the years, and how the universe needs women. And on that note, basically advances in technology have forever changed our lives and the nature of work, deepening already existing inequalities between and within societies. Women and girls face significant gender gaps in the labour force, positions in leadership, income, pensions and social protection. Structural barriers to women's economic empowerment throughout their life cycle have created barriers to women reaching their full potential. What are the solutions? How can we prepare women and girls to meet the challenges of the changing nature of work in the 21st century? Today, you will learn about some of the solutions and hear the stories of women who have met those challenges. And I'd like to introduce Maria Fornella, and I will stop sharing while you get your presentation ready, Maria.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me to address the Soroptimist International Forum.
May I introduce you? Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, I'm sorry.
My apologies.
This is going to take long. Okay.
Maria Fornella is one of our 6 representatives of Soroptimist International at the United Nations headquarters in New York. And Maria was born in Montevideo, Uruguay. She holds degrees in English, French, and international law from the University of the Republic of Uruguay, as well as a master's degree in international relations from Old Dominion University in Virginia. For 20 years, she taught international and comparative politics at ODU, where she organised an annual academic seminar for students at UN headquarters. She's also very active in the local chapter of Virginia Organising, doing advocacy work for immigration reform and in the local branch of the American Association of University. women working on human trafficking, equal pay and access to Medicaid in Virginia. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Lee. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everywhere, wherever you are, Soroptimists, sisters. We are here, yes, at a difficult time, and I'm very happy that our organization is showing its solidarity with the Ukrainian people, especially women and children. Women's economic empowerment is essential not only to gender equality, but also to break the cycles of poverty, of intergenerational poverty, inequality and discrimination also. Women and girls living in poverty are most vulnerable to exploitation and violence of all kinds. There are multiple causes for women's impoverishment, but the main one is discrimination in all its forms. And gender pay discrimination is a major one, and the one that I was asked to discuss today in relationship to social protection systems and to the new world of work. First of all, we cannot ignore the pandemic. COVID-19 is a watershed event that will be placed in broader historical perspective, but we already know that it will probably push 47 million more women into poverty, reversing decades of progress to eradicate extreme poverty. So what we need to bear in mind as advocates for women's rights is that we are in a transition. Whether this transition is fair or not depends on us, but it's a good time to advocate for rights. It's a good time to advocate for review of policies such as social protection systems and decent work. Yes, next slide, please. So I think you're all aware that globally, women only make 77 cents. Maybe the cipher changes a little, but 77 cents for every dollar that men earn. And this wage gap is larger for women with children. So despite progress, gender gap persists. This problem has been with us for a long time. And we need, what I did was to explore why it still exists and what can be done, what changes that we haven't envisioned yet have to take place. Thank you. Next one. Equal pay means that all workers have the right to receive equal remuneration for work of equal value. This is a more complex concept than just equal pay, right? Equal pay for work of equal value. And since there is segregation in the labor market and women perform jobs that are usually less considered and they are underpaid. So it's not an easy concept. IILO provides many examples of how you can compare different professions, occupations by men and women, but that could be one problem of the difference in remuneration. But what we need to realize is that the gender pay gap is rooted in systemic inequalities, a whole pay structure and social protection system based on the male breadwinner that works full-time and will probably have a full-time job throughout his lifetime, and his contributions towards an old age pension will reflect that. That's one thing to bear in mind. Women are overrepresented in the informal sector around the globe. That's why many of them lack social protections. Gender stereotypes steer women away from occupations that have been traditionally dominated by men. And there's also discrimination in hiring and promotion practices. And here we're going, as you see, number 3 and 4, we're going more into societal norms and rules, societal and cultural norms and rules that are so entrenched in our societies that it's difficult to get rid of them. For example, that opportunity gap men have better network in some professions. You know, a lot of progress has been made. Sometimes I say things that I'm thinking, well, not so much anymore. But yes, the opportunity gap. There's networks of men, old boy networks that women don't have access to. Another main reason is that although care work is the backbone of thriving families, communities, and economies, it remains undervalued, underpaid, and underrecognized. The motherhood penalty refers to why it's another reason for the inequity, and it refers to life cycles when women have to stop working, leave the labor market, spend some time child rearing, and then try to re-entry the labor market, and that's difficult per se. This interruption in participation of labor market also affects their contributory history, and we find that old age pensions are much lower for women. Some of the reasons are some kind of discrimination, women's retire earlier, etc. But mainly it's because they're either in informal jobs, so they haven't contributed, and or they have interrupted participation in the labor market. Thank you. Next. Key aspects of decent work and the new world of work are already embedded in the targets of several SDGs, and I will talk about those in a minute. Productive employment and decent work are key to fair global poverty reduction. I'll go back to a few goals in a minute, but before I do that, yes, next, I like to mention that the gender pay gap persists. It's stubborn, it's subtle, but it's always there, in spite of national legislation in most countries that establishes equal pay for equal work, or for equal pay for equal for work of equal value. There's also international treaties. So the legal principles of equality and non-discrimination are at the core of human rights treaties and declarations and conventions, and they provide the foundation for the enjoyment of all human rights. Article 11 of CEDAW already has the right to equal remuneration, including benefits. Yes, next. At the same time, the IILO, and I was surprised when I looked this up, I didn't remember, has two conventions on remuneration and on discrimination and employment and occupation that date from the 1950s. This is how old the recognition of the problem came, and how we have made some advances, but how it's still there, how stubborn it is. Next. So I'll go into a few of the SDGs to show you that they are, I really think it's the best framework that we could have, but we need to accelerate progress towards them. And we all know that COVID has put us behind, but as a framework, as an international legal framework, they are really wonderful. No poverty, eradication of poverty, the first goal has a target 1.3 that calls for the implementation of social protection systems, including floors, and to achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. As you see, it also says appropriate social protection systems. This means that we leave it up to countries and their individual histories and cultures to establish social protection, but we demand social protection floors for everyone. Next. SDG 5, well, SDG 5, you all know it, gender equality. It's and this, I really like this target, and I'll tell you why after I read it. 5.4 recognizes the value of unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and the promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family as nationally appropriate. I like very much this target because it recognizes unpaid care, the work that women do at home, those hours that are not counted, but that are subtracted from our from our contributions, because we're not making contributions when we're not working, but it also includes social responsibility. It includes public service responsibility, social protection, which is the role of the state, but it also includes social responsibility, a distribution of work in the family between men and women. Yeah. Okay. And SDG goal 8 is fundamental to the talk today because it includes decent work and economic growth. So it includes the IILO agenda on decent work, which is standards and rights for all workers, employment creation, social protection, and social dialogue, so that it enables bargaining. Bargaining for their salary is a very weak point for women. So I'm glad that it's included there, because we need to learn to bargain better as men do. Okay, so achieve full and productive employment, hold on just a second, and decent work for all women and men, including for young people and persons with disabilities, and equal pay for work of equal value. Yes, we can go on to the next one, and I'll show you quickly some of the problematic stats. You already know them. I've already pretty much named them, I think. Globally, only 26.4% of women of working age women are covered by contributory old age protection. This affects pensions very directly. And I'm sure you've heard that older women are the most vulnerable group right now that is increasingly falling into poverty. So women underrepresentation of women in the labor market is a major issue. And by labor market, we mean the formal labor market with contributions. Overrepresentation in the informal sector is the other side of that coin. Women assume 75% of all unpaid care work and spend 2.5 times more time on household and care chores than men. I'm telling you all this, which you know, but here it's with numbers. Women work shorter hours than men, resulting in 11 hours a week of less paid work. With the life cycle interruptions, the pensions are lower. I already said this because it's a very important point. And women, because of all these reasons, are excluded from most contribution-based schemes. Without complementary non-contributory schemes or more universal coverage, women are often left without sufficient social protection. So some of the policy solutions come next, and then I'll finish by talking a few minutes about social protection. The policy solutions come from the state. If the state provides public care services such as child care centers, that would enable women to enter and re-enter the labor market, to enter it in the first place and then to re-enter it once they've been pregnant and child rearing, etc. Formalization of care work is an effective way of removing barriers to women participation in the labor force. And formalization of work is very much stressed by the IILO in their decent work agenda. So what they're trying to do is helping IILO and other agencies are helping countries figure out how to bring the informal workers into the formal economy, which means registries, it means a different tax base, contribution, and many other changes. Establishment of a living minimum wage is important, and of course, universal social protection to go with that. Implementing work standards and regulation for safe, fair, and safe and fair work environment. Women, because they are in the informal sector or in low-paid jobs, run more risk of accidents in the workplace, and of course of other types of unfair work practices. And finally, flexible working arrangements, which is very important. Again, remember that the whole system is based on the old male breadwinner and the 9 to 5 and the 40-hour week, etc. Flexible working arrangements would work wonderfully for women, especially in the context of the digital revolution. So remote work is an option. And next, we're going to social protection, which refers to the set of policies and programs aimed at protecting people against poverty. Reforming social protection systems is very important at this time. Universal access to basic social security guarantees, income security to the under or unemployed, paid maternity leave and paternity leave, or even family leave as it's being done in some European countries. Childcare and other social healthcare support, insurance against lost income during sickness, occupational injuries, and adequate pensions in retirement. And then finally, I just wanted to show that social protection systems have different levels. So what we advocate for is at least floors, social protection for floors. The four essential guarantees of basic income security for children, assistance to the unemployed, I've already said them, and basic income security for the elderly and the disabled. And finally, just to finish, I wanted, I'm sure most of you know about it, but there is a new initiative, a relatively new initiative from 2017 called EPIC International, which is a partnership with multi-stakeholders, but the leaders are the UN Women, IILO, and OECD. It was launched during the General Assembly in 2017, and its aim is to contribute to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, calling especially and specifically for equal pay for work of equal value. And with this, I finish my presentation, but I think I've been asked to fill some gap. But thank you very much for listening. I'm going to drink some water because my voice is suffering.
Thank you very much, Maria. I mean, my voice is going too. A lot of the points that you've picked on there, or that you've mentioned, the discrimination with the pandemic, 47 million women going into poverty from COVID, that's quite amazing because it doubles our work. So we need quadruple our members to start working and advocating. The old boy network, and how many of us through our lifetime have experienced the old boy network that brings poverty and connections, poverty to women, but connections to the men. And it just brings so many things, such as the homeless for the older women, and that lack of social protection. But thank you very much for your presentation. I'd now like to introduce Jane Aberhard-Hodges. Jane is an international gender equality consultant, which is a policy director for Every Woman Treatment. A postgraduate in international law and practicing attorney before joining the International Labour Organization, Jane served a 3 decades career at IILO headquarters and in the field of the areas international and comparative labour law and gender equality and human rights. Her legacy there includes the 2019 Convention 190 on violence and harassment in the world of work. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. I know I'll be very quick, and it's like being home speaking straight after Maria, because there's so much ILO work, and you think of a huge organization, tripartite in nature, the oldest of the United Nations specialized agencies. Yet it still manages to do such incredibly needed work. I was lucky enough to be running the gender directorate when member states told everyone that violence and harassment in companies and in ecosystems was starting to cost too much. And a movement came almost 10 years ago for the ILO to adopt a standard. It is a standard setting organization. And that culminated in 2017 with the 2019, sorry, with the Convention 190 on violence and harassment at work, in the world of work, and its accompanying recommendation 206. Just to make sure you understand the difference, in the ILO terms, conventions are treaties, They're binding once ratified by a member state and can be used in all kinds of domestic situations, both as directly entering into the jurisdiction's work, or having to be in common law systems introduced through a particular piece of parliamentary legislation. Whereas recommendations like 206 are, as their name states, purely suggesting, giving good advice, and a lot of detail during negotiations of the texts actually goes into the recommendation. And the conventions remain crisp, doable, realistic, because again, workers, employers, and states negotiate these texts to be implemented, to be real. So 190, as I say, was a while in coming. There had been older conventions that had aspects concerning violence, particularly violence against women. And I'm thinking of the Convention 189 on domestic workers, where we all know the majority are worldwide women. And that had a special article, and all ratifying states still have to report on Convention 189, end violence against domestic workers. But the situation had become such, and this is before COVID, before COVID-19 restrictions and all the data coming out of WHO and other international agencies showing that domestic violence and violence against women during the pandemic has skyrocketed. But way back, almost 10 years ago, member states, workers and employers decided this had to be addressed by an international labour standard. 190 came into being in June 2019. It was not universally adopted, which was a great surprise to us of the Secretariat. I'd just retired then and was given by the Director General himself a special seat as an observer. There were a few votes against, sadly, from employers, not a lot, but there were a few, about 7. And there were a few abstentions from countries in a very low level of development. But overall, in view of all the years that conventions have been adopted, it was pretty strongly voted for. Likewise for the recommendation. It has been ratified to date by 10 member states, and you can ask me later which ones they are. It's quite an interesting group, and not necessarily the group that spoke during the negotiations of the text. Why is it important to understand Convention 190 and its accompanying recommendation 206? First of all, it is the first international instrument that really defines in very clear and specific terms violence and harassment in the world of work. It doesn't say in the workplace. There was a big debate about that. The workplace was perceived to be too narrow. So it's all aspects of the world of work. It defines, while I'm on it, violence and harassment to be a range of unacceptable behaviours and practices or threats of that, even if a single occurrence. Many national laws had already said that, but here it is, it's now international labour law. These practices or behaviours being unacceptable that aim at or result in, whether you mean it to be the result, doesn't matter, physical, psychological, sexual, or economic harm. So there's 4 areas. Economic harm was already introduced in some other UN instances, but this is the first treaty, the first binding treaty that puts it in words. And I continue the definition, and includes gender-based violence and harassment. And in turn, gender-based violence and harassment is defined to include violence, harassment directed at persons because of their sex or gender, and specifically includes sexual harassment. So as I mentioned earlier on, all ratified international labour standards, depending on your legal system, can eventually be justiciable. They can enter into your complaint or your case and be used. So this was an enormous breakthrough to have just in one article those clear definitions very much linked to the world of work. Second reason why it is outstanding, this instrument. It is extremely broad. yes, in the beginning, the employers were saying, well, if you're not going to say just the workplace, you're going to say the world of work, but it's very hard for us. How can we control things? For example, many national laws and case law decisions have said the workplace includes anywhere where people work. But this text very clearly says it also includes where workers take a rest. It includes the toilets. It includes where they are changing their clothes, perhaps particularly in mining industries and seafarers. It includes work-related trips, travel, training, and social. The famous Christmas party groping is now in an international labour law text. It includes online work, very good debate on that, all kinds of communications and any kind of communications technology. It includes accommodation, which is very common in some parts of the world, particularly where there's large migration populations who live in organised accommodation. And it includes the commute to and from work. I come from Australia, as you can probably guess from my accent, and that was a big debate many, many years ago to get into legislation that work time includes your most direct travel to your workplace and your return home, particularly in the context of work-related accident compensation. But now we have it for violence. So this was a tricky one. The commute employers were saying, well, why should we be responsible if someone gropes you on a bus? Or the famous under the photographs being taken of under women's skirts. Well, the answer is, of course, and it was well clarified during negotiations, that it is the states, the governments that have to organise this. But if the employer provides the commuting service, and again, this is very common in some areas. I used to work in Africa for the IILO, and that was a very common setup for some of the big companies to have the minibus picking up women to go to the factories quite early in the morning and taking them home at night. And in that commute, it is the employer's responsibility, and the other public commutes, it's the state. Great definition, first ever, very, very broad in scope, private and public sectors. What's a third big area of interest? It does specifically mention domestic violence, which had for years, even in the 1970s for CEDAW negotiations, had been always untouched because it was considered the private sphere. And what happens in your home is your own business. Of course, unless it comes out as your legislation has put crimes such as murder, no matter where they occur, as criminally prosecuting. Domestic violence and the impact it has on the world of work is very well articulated in the convention, and the recommendation has a lot of advice about what to do as regards domestic violence, including time off to attend to your injuries, your broken arm, your battered eye, or to look after the children who are under threat by the domestic violence situation, or, for example, you've been summoned to a court case, for example, where the perpetrator is being criminally charged. The convention does not say paid time off, which was a big debate at the time. There was even a very strong lobby, interestingly, led by countries like New Zealand and the Philippines, saying that should be international law. We're not saying how much. Some countries have 5 days, some countries have 7, some countries say as required. But anyway, the vote was lost. It just says time off to attend to domestic violence. Fourth big point to note, it links the human right to work without violence and harassment to the occupational safety and health right to live a healthy life and not be damaged at work. Because remember, we're talking of physical, psychological, sexual, or economic harm. And that link with occupational safety and health was very welcome for a lot of governments who already had issues like sexual harassment strictly under their occupational safety and health law, rather than under their labour law, or for that matter, under their end sexual violence law or their general gender equality law. that's what is interesting with the OSH link, is that it brings in that huge, in most countries, most developed countries, the huge government machinery that go out and check workplaces and check the world of work, and they check commutes, which might not always happen for if we just had the human rights element. There's that very strong practical side to having included OSH as the underpinning of this right to work free of violence and harassment. And of course, it's very, very strong on training of all groups involved in violence and harassment. It's very strong on data, the collection of data. So it's not just labour inspectorates or labour courts or the equivalent, whatever your system is, that should be collecting data on such cases. It is forcing whole of government approach. Sometimes it's called in UN circles the holistic approach to violence. It's making governments which ratify this text ensure that their databases talk to each other, and of course that their policymakers talk to each other. Good whistleblower protection, by the way, a lot in the convention itself. If you get time to read Article 10, fabulous work on not only the prevention side, the training, the education, but on prosecution and on sanctions. I'll stop there and hope that I've inspired you that at last we've got one instrument linked only to the world of work, but one instrument that takes ending violence very seriously.
Jane, thank you. That's amazing. I've learned quite a lot there, I must admit. I need to get the conventions out. But to have the details of the commute and the harassment and violence, even to the toilet, things like that, because even in my corporate life over the years, so many of those cases that have come forward, but never taken further. You know, that is quite amazing. That is something that we need to educate every one of our women going into the corporate world, into any workplace whatsoever. Thank you very much for that detail. I'd now like to introduce Beverly Bucur. Bev is the current chair of global policy for Soroptimist International, and she served from 2017 to 2021 as Director of Advocacy. So Bev has done many years in this role. Thank you, Bev. In her professional life, Bev has 40 years of experience in education as a teacher and administrator. She is a National Board Certified Master Teacher and has an MA in Educational Administration, an MA in Reading, and a BS in Elementary Education, and a certificate in Bilingual Education. She has designed programs including STEAM and STEM programs for students, and worked with governors, state university, and the Teacher Quality Partnership to design and implement effective teaching training and mentoring programs in order to improve student learning. So Bev, I'd like you to, do you have a presentation? Or?
I do. I will share my screen.
Okay.
Let's see. Hello, everyone. Where should we start on education? Just like when we talk about the world of work, we know that, well, the future here to Guterres, United Nations, made some comments in
Bev, the connection is not very good. Yeah, you're falling out, Bev.
Okay. I think I will have to probably shut off my my camera.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, in 2020, in his report on COVID-19 and its effect on education, Antonio Guterres said that education is key to personal development and the future of societies. It unlocks opportunities and narrows inequalities. It is the bedrock of an informed, tolerant societies and the primary driver of sustainable development. And we know that education is key to financial independence. And that's why Soroptimists work in their local communities and at the international level to educate, empower, and enable women and girls to achieve financial independence. Where to even start when we're thinking about the jobs of the future? We know that things are changing so fast with technology advances and artificial intelligence. Things are changing at such a rate that we really don't know what the jobs of the future may look like. We also have the great divide between the countries in the global South and the global North. In the global South, we're working on areas such as literacy. We're looking to provide computers and technology skills, and most important, to provide universal internet to everyone so that all people, but particularly women and girls, can learn in a digital world and can join the 21st century workforce. When looking at skills for future jobs, these are some of the skills that employers said were absolutely necessary. I'm not going to talk at all about STEM courses because we have two experts following me, but some of those skills that are important are listed here. And I'm not going to read them because you can see them, but it is really important. I'm going to focus on the critical thinking skills. If you look at what's happening in the world today, you know that it's not only important to be able to use technology and use the internet, but critical skills are absolutely important. When we think about what's posted, anyone and everyone can post on the internet. What we need to teach our students, and I did this from primary grades on, is to think about those posts. What, first of all, are they, who's posting it? What's the purpose of posting those things on the internet? Are they reliable? When I look at something on the internet, I always do background checking work. I go to, for example, the news media, reliable news media, and I take a look. When a post is on, I go to some of the engines where they do fact checking, and I see who's posting that. And then you can tell what their purpose is, and you can determine if it's something that you want to share. Today, the Secretary General posted something about, it was think about what you post online. And he pointed out especially that in this situation with the Ukraine and Russia, we have to be very careful because we don't want to endanger people. So he said, be careful on what you post. You know, if you're posting strong criticisms, this could have an effect on some of the innocent people, you know, in Russia, and it could have an effect on the people of the Ukraine. Today's newspaper, the New York Times, posted that there are so many amateurs trying to block, they're working on disrupting the systems both in Russia and in the Ukraine. And this is dangerous to an informed public who needs to know the facts. Negotiating and reasoning skills, again, are most important. We need to be able to look at things. We need to be able to negotiate, and women in particular need to be able, I think Maria mentioned this, we need to be able to negotiate for ourselves. Men do it all the time, but women are reluctant. They undervalue their, their value in the world of work, and they tend to take a lower pay than a man would accept. Resilience, we need to, in the future, and even today, we need to be able to keep reinventing ourselves. As jobs change, we don't always have a physical workplace. We will be working online. We will be collaborating with others. We might be working in situations where we do short-term projects and jobs. So it's going to be necessary in today's world, but also in the future, for us to be ready and willing to keep on reinventing ourselves. I mentioned artificial intelligence. A lot of the jobs that we have now for workers with low-level skills, and these are some of the jobs that women currently do, and a lot of these jobs will be eliminated. I spoke to someone just yesterday, and what engineers are working on is to figure out how computers can more efficiently talk to each other, and so that there's less need for humans to come on the line and assist you in customer service in a variety of areas. Stores are becoming automated, where you check your own selves out. So we have to be able to train our young women and girls for the future. We must also understand that learning is going to take place through our life's course. Women are going to work longer because we live longer, and it's important to have education opportunities available to women all through the life course. Soroptimist works on many levels, and if you look at some of the things we do, oops, I forgot a slide, the global citizenship. This is also extremely important. Our UN reps in UNESCO work on global citizen education. And if you think of the world today, technology makes the world very, very small. We can communicate with each other, and it's really important for our students and all learners to know that we're all part of one world, and we must all work together. SDG 4.7 is the goal that works on global citizenship education, and it promotes gender equality, a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and cultural diversity. It's important to include this in our education and training, because otherwise we don't have the tolerance that we need. Many of our students are on the internet and they hear negative things about other cultures. So it's important that we provide an awareness of cultural diversity and that this is a good thing. So we want to include this in our educational programs. I'm going to show you two of Soroptimist's programs from the President's Appeal, The Road to Equality, that focus on global citizenship education. And the first one is the Lugari Leadership and Mentoring Camp in Western Kenya that prepares girls to be leaders. They receive training and awareness, media literacy, peace building, and all sorts of activities that help them to be leaders and change makers in their community. But one of the, if you looked at the goals of SDG 4.7, one of them is to actually demonstrate the skills. And that's exactly what they do in this project. All of the girls, and it was 150 that participated in 2021, everyone is expected to go back in their community, take these skills that they've learned and design a community project. So they then bring this back and the projects are judged and the best one awarded a prize. But the importance is what the community gets from these projects. They understand the value of education for girls, and they understand that women are an important part of the community and deserve roles in leadership. The second one, Beyond Football, was the goal of that was to correct unequal access in education. And again, it was a project to empower women and girls to become leaders. And they did this through academics, leadership, and athletics. The athletics part teaches many things, self-awareness, leadership, skills, following directions, and so on, and also getting along with others, because the girls were from a variety of indigenous communities. So this project also developed girls as leaders, and it brought in people from sports teams to look at girls with sports ability. It gave the ability to continue on with school by providing academic scholarships. And again, it raised the awareness of the importance of girls' education and how girls could be leaders in their community. We have a number of Soroptimist projects, and we work very hard on this SDG. We also have leadership, the European Leadership Academies, and a variety of other projects, the DREAM programs and SIA. So I want to say thank you to all Soroptimists, because you indeed are helping to develop the women and girls for the future world of work.
Thank you, Bev. Some of those points, the digital divide, I see that even amongst a lot of our members, we should be having education. You think you get on top of it at our age, and then suddenly it goes ahead again, all the technology. So it's constant, lifelong learning, as Tanner put in the chat box as well. And those two projects that you presented, the leadership, they're solutions, and it's wonderful to see that we should be able to hopefully implement more leadership that awakens the women and the girls, the Indigenous girls, the less vulnerable girls, to all sorts of rights and things that they can benefit from in life and take back to their community. So it's a win-win situation. Thank you very much for that presentation, Bev. Now we'd like to introduce Elizabeth Peterson to talk to us about the STEM professions.
It looks like I have my notes on the screen. We don't have to share them, but if you'd like to, I could take my screen off. And anyway, hello to our United World of Women. I am Elizabeth Peterson, and I'm a member of the Soroptimist International of the Americas group, and I'm in the Connecticut Shoreline section in the United States. I want to help prepare all of you for the United Nations CSW66. We're here to educate, empower, and enable, and I want to help you make a difference in the sphere that you live and work in. Can you see my computer or just me?
Just you.
Okay, good. All right. So I have been in the STEM career for about 40 years. And I want to talk to you about the future of work and give you some guides on girls' education's choices, some direction that you can give people for their early careers, and then also women who are reinventing themselves. We'll talk about some issues and solutions. Back in 1980s, I got degrees in electrical engineering and computer engineering. Let's talk about what engineering is. Engineers use science, technology, and math to develop economical, which is business solutions to technical problems. Engineers are changing the world all the time. They dream up creative, practical solutions and work with other smart, inspiring people to invent, design, and build things that matter. And I will be telling you some things that I've done research on in the past, and I want to give you my resources. So those definitions actually came from a place called engineeryourlife.com. Now, why did I pick this career? It wasn't like when I was younger, I always wanted to be an engineer. As a matter of fact, I had no idea what they were, because not a lot of my family members were involved in that type of work at all. But I did have an aptitude in math and science. I liked them, and I saw a lot of future promise in that area. Also, I grew up in Groton, Connecticut, and a lot of my friends had parents who were engineers at Electric Boat Corporation for General Dynamics. And I happen to be working there now. I've been working there for 4 years. So it was common for me to hear that people were engineers or working in the tech field, and even women working in the tech field. To do my job, I need a bachelor's degree to fulfill my role working for the United States government building nuclear submarines. And what do I like best about my occupation? I found this also on Engineer Your Life, and it really rings true to me. And that is, I do change the world. I get to be creative. I work with a lot of great, smart, inspiring people. I make a difference. I perform interesting work. I make a big salary. I get to solve problems. I travel. I enjoy job flexibility, and I love my work, and I get to live my life too. So I speak as an electrical engineer, computer engineer, technical program manager. I've fulfilled a lot of other roles, but you could make that also a generalization on STEM careers. So what do STEM workers do? They might use formulas and calculations. They may design, they may build, they may manufacture. They could manage and oversee or regulate. They might do research and development. They may inspect, they may sell, they may teach. There's so many different types of jobs in STEM. Let's talk about then and now. When I first started 40 years ago, things were a little different in some ways and a lot different than other ways. There's much ground that females have gained on gender equality in the past century, and it is at risk and eroding. There's a deepening amount of inequalities, and it's getting worse with the algorithm biases that you're seeing, and we can do something about it. Okay, so as far as barriers to women reaching their full potential, yeah, I'd say over in the past 40 years, we have come a long way. And actually, when I got my first engineering job, I got hired and paid more, $1,000 more a year than the men. And somehow it got out and there were people mad about it. And what can I say? They wanted to retain me. So, that's a little bit opposite than, what we have going on usually. There used to be pornography hanging on the walls, and in guys' toolboxes, I'd go over and talk to them. They open up their toolbox and there'd be naked women pictures. So I didn't like it, but I kind of turned the cheek and ignored it because that's just the way that it was. So you don't see that anymore for the most part. Especially in large corporations in the United States, you just don't get away with that. That is inappropriate. There used to be a lot more swearing. There still is in some cases, so it's the guys and the girls. So I noticed though, when I took time off from work to raise my children and I came back, the workplace was a more civil place and there was a lot less swearing. There was more of a glass ceiling, and we're seeing that there's a lot more women on the boards and CEO positions now. I remember one time I went on a business trip, and this man who was a supervisor I was with, he wanted to share a drink with me, and he had just one straw, and he's like, "Oh, we can share it," and I'm like, "Ew, no," and so like those things don't really happen now. It was more commonplace again. I used to just turn my cheek and laugh about it and just try to protect myself. So I wasn't in any situation like a rape situation, but I know some women, they kind of slept their way to the top, and they were getting 25% raises, so it kind of worked out for them. I'd say that at times things were non-inclusive for me. I learned how to play golf so I could, hang around with the guys. There was microaggressions, and there still are unconscious bias, and there still is harassment. There was a lot more, even dismissive messaging and causing self-doubt. So I think that corporations in the United States, because I'm more familiar with that, there's a lot more going on in the human resources to protect their workers, their female workers. And even things like ineffective feedback. A lot of times women would leave the STEM field and not come back because they just didn't feel like they were comfortable. So I remember even a generation before me, one of the women told me that the guys were throwing tools at her. They were up above and using her for a target, and they thought it was funny. And she wasn't really protected too. The human resources had other things to do, or, you know, even World War II, the men came back from the war and then the women just gave up their jobs because that was what was expected of them. Now, you know, you have the social protections with HR, and people are calling out their perpetrators, and you know, see what's happened with the Me Too movement. There's been a lot of progress. Still, we have algorithmic biases that are perpetuating, intensifying gender biases and aggressions in the digital age. And there are many reasons why women are being left behind digitally. And so we all can help that out, help that cause, and educate people and keep on advocating for what we do. Cyberspace is now the new frontline. And there exists the digital divide with people that have access to internet and people who don't. So let's talk about some solutions. We want to prepare women and girls to meet the challenges of our changing nature of work in the 21st century. We want to encourage lifetime learning because, you know what, sometimes you learn skills and they are not needed a couple years later. So a lot of people, especially in the computer business, you have to learn new languages, or you have to learn new programs, and you have to be receptive to change, understand that you need to be able to be resilient and move forward. It's important for us to mentor women and girls and be there for them, be their role models, help them out, and not just talk to them once. Sometimes you need to do that life cycle where you're following them along their journey to ensure that they're making significant progress. Also, with the changing world of work, we want to be more flexible, nimble, and open to change. For the girls, encourage them to take their classes in math and science. And a lot of times they are not being encouraged. They have the same capabilities as the boys, but you know, for one reason or the other, they don't have the same confidence. And so they're dropping out a lot of times. 5th grade, 8th grade, at least in the United States. Those are times when you can really try to catch the children and help them out and get over that inconfident stage. So as far as skill sets go, there's so many advances in technology that have forever changed the lives of lives of our workers and the nature of work. So you know, for office workers, you know, there's you know, sometimes we think, well, STEM jobs are only engineers and scientists and tradespeople, but even you know, people that have really great skills in business and English for communications, you know, in the purchasing side, supply side, planning, scheduling, supervising. As far as education and training goes, I wanted to mention that, you know, sometimes associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate degree, and I am such a big advocate of all of them, but maybe it's not so attainable where people might just, you know, be able to, you know, work on training and certificates. And it really goes a long way in finding work. So for instance, like Amazon Web Service, and Qualsys has cloud certifications, coding certifications, cybersecurity certifications, Microsoft Office, Teams, Microsoft Project, Safe Stories, project management, program management, PMP certification, coding, could be a lot of different languages, blockchain technology. Well, as far as solutions, we want to recruit girls. We want to have role models with hands-on experience, problem-based life applications. Faculty help perceive respect and helpfulness for the students. And we want to have positive experiences in student societies. So I want us to all dream ambitiously, be mentors, and keep your girls going. Be fearless in the pursuit that sets your soul on fire. At the same time, make sure that you're protecting yourself, your family, and your community. You want to advocate that for the girls and the women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We could have a whole session on some of the solutions that you've got there. Some of the things I noticed that you actually had exposure earlier in your life to get you into the STEM projects, which your background had not given you. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity too, to expose young girls to more STEM projects and outreach as you've been involved with. The things that STEM projects can offer, the building, the research, everything must intrigue some of the young minds that we have with our young women. The solutions, the positive experience, thank you very much. This is recorded, so a lot more Soroptimists and other members will be watching and listening to what you have to say. Now we have to go on to Elena Pinetti.
Hi everyone.
From which is the president of our E-Club Milano net lead, and she has the universe needs more women. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so so in principle, I can share them so that it's bigger. There is slideshow. Okay, so now in principle, you should see a big screen with the universe needs women, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, let me see if it works. Okay, it works. Great. So hi everyone, and thank you for having me today. So the title of my talk is The Universe Needs Women. And in my talk, I will tell you about my personal background, and I will explain why it is important to have more women in scientific fields. And finally, I will present some ideas about what we can do as a Soroptimist. So my name is Elena Pinetti, I'm 27 years old. I'm an astroparticle physicist, as well as the president of the E-Club Milano net lead. And I have two great passions. One is science, and the other is fighting for women's rights. So I come from a small town, Asti, a small city in Italy, well known for its wine, for the annual horse racing, where people wear medieval clothes, and for our beautiful hills, which are parts of the UNESCO patrimony. In my journey, I completed a joint PhD at the University of Turin and at the Sorbonne University in Paris. And after my PhD, I moved to Chicago, where I work currently at Fermilab on dark matter searches. Now, when I tell people that I work on dark matter, they usually want to know more about it. So in 1 minute, I will give you a very short introduction about our amazing universe. So one of the main open questions of our century is what does the universe consist of? And in our present understanding, there is roughly 5% of our universe made up of nuclear matter. That is stars, planets, galaxies, our bodies, all that we observe. Then we have a 95% of our universe, which is not well understood. And we think that there are two main components. One is dark energy, which is responsible for the current expansion of our universe. And the other is dark matter, which is was a work on. And in particular, we believe that dark matter is made up of new elementary particles that are different from the particles that we are familiar with. It's very difficult to detect these particles since they do not interact with ordinary matter, and therefore we need to be a little creative. So one way to study these particles is with our telescopes, and in particular, we study the messengers that dark matter might produce. So this is a little introduction on my topic of research. Now, what we want to understand is why, first of all, it's important to encourage women to have a STEM career. Reason number one, there are more jobs than people with a scientific background, and the open positions keep increasing. Reason number two, people with technical skills are the most wanted candidates, and therefore they usually earn higher salaries, which more likely leads to financial independence. Also, the gender pay gap is much lower in STEM careers with respect to other fields. And in fact, in STEM fields, women earn 92 cents for every dollar earned by men, compared to the $77 for other types of careers, as reminded before by Maria Fornella. So we obviously want to completely overcome the gender pay gap in every field, but I think it's positive to remind that at least in STEM careers, we are closer. But despite this, women are only 35% of all students enrolled in STEM-related fields, and only 28% of all the world's researchers. And this number clearly depends on the fields. So if we consider biology, for example, we have more women. If we consider physics or computer sciences, there you will find even less women. So we need to overcome the barriers that women and girls face in order to have more women in STEM. And so the question is, what can we do as Soroptimist? And one of the reasons why few girls enrolled in STEM curricula is the lack of role models. Inside Soroptimist, there are many women with a STEM career, and together we can actually show that science is a job for women. Now, with my club, the Club Milano et Lead, we started a project called Friday STEM. Every Friday, we publish on our social media a short video of 30 seconds where one of our STEM members explains why she chose a STEM career and what is her job about. Now, on one side, we want to encourage girls to study STEM subjects, but on the other side, we need to create the conditions in the workplace so that women remain and also advance in their career. Unfortunately, inside many universities and research centers, there is still a huge problem of gender discrimination. So we need really to raise awareness among the leaders and the people about this situation. For this reason, with my club, we are going to host a screening of the movie Picture a Scientist that tells the story of many women in science and the challenges also that they faced. So the movie night will also be open to everyone. So please let us know if you are interested, and we will send you the registration link. It is also important to build networks with other groups and other associations. For example, I'm part of the Supernova Foundation, which is a mentoring program, an international mentoring program for women in physics. We are a community of more than 400 women from all over the world. And the goal of this community is that experienced scientists provide guidance and support through personal mentorship to students in order to encourage female students to pursue a career in science. And it's really a brilliant organization, a brilliant program. And then also another possibility is that scholarship to support women in need are also very useful, especially because we know that if we support a woman to get a STEM degree, that woman will likely be financially independent. So with my club, we are doing an advocacy project called Keep a Girl in School. This project provides washable sanitary pads to girls with a disadvantaged background in South Africa, who otherwise will likely drop out of school. And I take this opportunity to thank all the Soroptimist sisters and clubs who are supporting us with the current fundraising. Now, if you want to know more about the activities of the Club Milano et Lead, please follow us on our social media. And with this, I conclude, and I thank all of you for your attention in every language. Thank you very much.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Elena, very, very much. So today you have heard from Maria with the gender pay gap and social protection. Jane has shown us and spoke with details in 190, IILO 190, with the accompanying 206, violence and harassment, jobs in the 21st century, this Elizabeth on STEM, universe needs women. Some of the main things that is common throughout all of those is the mentoring and what Soroptimists can do and a lot of the solutions throughout there. Thank the speakers very, very much for participating.